Now, I'd like to go back to the very beginnings of Chinese medicine, and it's one of the things which I realise after practicing for many years is the richness in some of the very simple phrases that they use. So when you study Chinese medicine, right in the very first year, you come across the expression, the liver opens into the eyes. And you think, okay, that's great, liver opens into the eyes, spleen, the flesh, got to learn that for the test. But actually, in that saying, there's an awful lot is contained. First of all, there's the recognition that the eyes are connected to an internal organ. Now, this has been part of Chinese medicine ever since the earliest times. You can see this in the Neijing, for example. And of course, it's from the point of view of Chinese medicine, there's nothing special there. You say, well, of course, it's the liver relates to the eyes. But actually, in Western medicine, they haven't made this connection. They haven't realized that the state of health of the body affects the eyes. In fact, a colleague of mine was talking to an ophthalmologist about the fact that maybe vitamins and minerals could help eye diseases, in particular macular degeneration. And he says, oh, don't be stupid. Vitamins and minerals, they can't affect the eyes. Don't be stupid. And he said, no, they do. Look, there's research to prove it. And he said, that research, don't believe it. No, don't believe it. Can't be true. Now, of course, he was an extremist here, but he represents, I would say, he represents the prevailing view. There's also a prevailing view, for example, that eye exercises can't help eye diseases, when manifestly they can. And so we can say from the point of view of Western medicine, they actually haven't made this connection, haven't made the connection that the eye is part of the body and is affected by all the internal organs. Of course, the main organ is the liver, but all the other organs come into play. So the old-fashioned view is that the 5 organs connect to the 5 colours which can be seen on the eye. The kidney, which connects to the black colour, connects to the pupil. The liver connects to the brown part. Now you might say, hey, wait a moment, the brown actually, the liver really relates to the green colour. But the character for green, which is qing, it does mean green, but it means a dull green. It means a dull green, but it also means a dull brown colour. Qing is actually the colour of nature, and it means sort of dull, boring colour. And so in that sense, one could say the iris, which is the brown colour, relates to the liver. We will see later on how there is more to it than just that. Then the heart relates to the red colour, and that relates to the inner canthus of the eye. Generally speaking, it doesn't very much, but there is actually a connection between the inner canthus and the heart, in that when the inner canthus is very pointed, then the person has a very good use of words. Their speech is very clear, and they can use words in a very distinguished way, or very wide way. The spleen relates to the flesh. It's not so much the colour, although in Chinese people, in Han people, one could say the colour is the yellow part is the eyelid. The spleen relates to the flesh, and so the eyelid, of course, is the fleshy part of the eye. And indeed, that when the spleen is weak, then it's easier to get prolapse of the eyelid. And also when the spleen damp accumulates, you can see bags under the eyes. One can also see people who have got food allergies. You can see in a certain distinctive coloration under the eyes. Then finally, there's the lung, which relates to the white colour Well, the white colour is, of course, the sclera of the eye. And indeed, we will see later on how this connection is one which has stood the test of time. So that's the old-fashioned view. I call it old-fashioned in the sense that it was there in the Neijing. Now, the development of ophthalmology in Chinese medicine received a terrific boost at the end of the Tang dynasty, when there was an input from India. There was Nagarjuna, the great Indian, wrote a treatise on eye diseases, which found its way into China under the name, it was translated under the name Longma, which is the literal translation of Nagarjuna. And that gave a whole new input into ophthalmology and Chinese medicine. And then gradually over the years, as Chinese medicine evolved, and in particular as the differentiation of syndromes and the Zhang Fu, as that theory evolved in the late Ming and then the Qing dynasty, then they started to think in terms of syndromes of the Zhang Fu and their effect on the eyes. So we can say that the liver opens into the eyes, and the liver is particularly concerned with the perception of light. And so we can see that liver blood deficiency can give rise to seeing black spots in front of the eyes. Now, some people consider these black spots to be floaters, but it's more than that. The black spots refer to actually almost blacking out. So when people have liver blood deficiency and they stand up suddenly, then the vision is much darkened. They don't see so well. So that's the liver blood deficiency. You may also see it as one of the patterns of colour blindness. When the liver blood is weak, it's not enough to nourish the eyes, and poor colour discrimination. Then the next pattern is liver heat. Liver heat can easily rise up and affect the eyes and can give rise to optic atrophy, for example, can give rise to glaucoma, conjunctivitis, all of these due to liver heat rising up. Last but not least, there is rage, which is connected to the liver, and rage can give rise to eye diseases. I have a patient who was once so overcome with rage that she actually burst a blood vessel in her eyes. The patterns of the heart's connected to the eyes because the heart rules the blood vessels, and any examination of the interior of the eye will show that it's lots of blood vessels. In fact, in China, when I was in China, they would routinely send people to the eye department for examination of the blood vessels, because they considered that you could actually see the state of blood vessels and determine whether they were hardened or not. And so there's the pattern of stagnation of blood, which can give rise to clots in the arteries and consequent lack of blood flow in parts of the eye, as can be seen in the accompanying diagram. There's a hardening of the arteries, which gives rise to a general degradation of the eyes and degradation of the vision, and maybe behind gradual deterioration of the eyes, or maybe behind macular degeneration. Then we also have heat in the blood. Heat in the blood can cause the blood to leak out of the arteries and give rise to retinal bleeding. Then finally, the heart is concerned with the Shen, and as such is concerned with perception, actually determining or interpreting what is seen. So the liver is actually to do with just the perception of light, whether you can see bright and dark, yellow, red, green, blue, and so on. But the heart is concerned with whether you can understand what you're looking at. So when the heart is weak, then you can look at something and you're much slower to work out what's going on. And in this context, you can see some connection with orthodox medicine, because in orthodox medicine, it's considered that the retina does some visual processing even before the signal reaches the brain. Now, in Chinese medicine, we would say the brain, the function of the brain is connected to the heart. And so in this context, you can say the function of the eye is also connected to the heart, the discrimination of objects. The spleen controls the flesh. We've seen that it covers the eyelids. It also covers the flow of fluids, and so the spleen may be involved in glaucoma, it may be involved in dry eyes, it may be involved in excessively watering eyes. The spleen also holds the blood in the blood vessels, and it is one of the patterns of retinal bleeding is when the spleen is too weak to hold the blood in the blood vessels. Spleen is also connected with the formation and transformation of phlegm. And you might think, well, where does phlegm appear in the eyes? It can appear in two ways. One is when the overall fluids become too thick, and consequently the fluids in the interior of the eye may become too thick and viscous. And when this happens, it's easy for the pressure to build up and for glaucoma, or at any rate ocular hypertension, may be as a result of the production of phlegm. There is another thing that one can see, which is on the retina itself. There is a symptom known as drusen. Drusen are little white flecks or white spots on the retina with accompanying small areas of visual disturbance or even blindness in these little dots. And these drusen are said in orthodox medicine to be due to leakage from the arteries, but my observation is that in Chinese medicine they correspond to deposits of thick phlegm. They have the analogy would be that if you have thick phlegm in the body, you could have like lipomas appearing on the skin. So the equivalent of lipoma on the skin is these little flecks, these little white deposits on the retina of the eye. The connection of the lungs and the eyes, that's very interesting. It's not just the white colour of the eyes which leads one to see this connection. It's the fact that the sclera and the conjunctiva are on the outside, and as such they're like the skin and the lungs. Of all internal organs, the lungs are most exterior in the sense that they take air in. And so just as the skin and the lungs have to adapt to different temperatures and to the wind and to dust and to dryness, so also the sclera and the conjunctiva have to make this adaptation. They still have to work okay if it's freezing outside or if it's very hot. And so they have to have the same adaptability as the lungs do. Finally, we can talk about the kidneys. Well, the kidneys have a very strong effect on the eyes because the kidneys rule the fluids, and there's these fluids, like the eye is actually full up with fluids. And in addition, you have the lens which connects to the kidneys, and so the black part of the eye, the pupil, and also you have the retina at the back, which, as we mentioned, is a network of nerves, but it's similar to the brain. And so just as the brain is connected with the kidneys, and so the retina is connected with the kidneys. And we will see later on that the diseases like macular degeneration, when the retina gradually stops working, have as their origin, have kidney weakness as their origin. So that's a brief summary of the ancient and modern views of the eye, the connection of the 5 organs and the syndromes and their connection to eye conditions.